Welcome to the hidden side of business success, where people who are thriving loud tell their deepest and darkest secrets. Happy Halloween, my crazy, scary Thrive Loud listeners. Don't let the ghosts, goblins, witches, and vampires haunt you this Halloween. Instead, listen to the Thrive Loud podcast and let Lou Diamond scare you himself with his talk about work, business, and future success. Oh yeah, that's so much scarier than the thought of a monster living under your bed. But it's okay, because it's a good kind of scary, I think. Anyways, you guys make sure to have a safe yet spooky Halloween, and as you keep listening, try not to be too frightened. Today on Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond.
How do we become so good that we can't get ignored? How do we become really good at unambiguously valuable things so we can build these really interesting and meaningful and satisfying lives? And it was really trying to solidify my answer to that question that my attention was drawn to this topic, which was focused attention seems to play an increasingly important role, especially in the knowledge economy, in how people do really well.
Get ready to thrive loud with Lou Diamond.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond, connecting you to the most inspiring and amazing people that are thriving each and every day. Today on Thrive Loud, we bring you an associate professor of computer science at Georgetown University. He is researching cutting-edge technology, and he also writes about the impact of these innovations on society. He is the author of 5 books, but his most recent, deep work argues that the ability to focus is becoming increasingly valuable in a modern work culture, increasingly hobbled by distracting technologies, something that everyone who's listening to this program completely understands. He also wrote a book with my all-time favorite motto, so good they can't ignore you. Thrive Loud listeners, I have the Cal Newport here with us from Washington, D.C. Cal, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
This is a great honor. We had Andrea Koppel, actually. I know you were on her program, Time for Coffee, and she literally got off the interview with me and called me up directly and says, "Oh my God, I just spoke to Cal Newport. He's so perfect for Thrive Loud. You got to come on." And I go, Cal Newport, I've read his book, and his book is literally right here on my bookshelf, which is kind of crazy. So Cal, thank you for coming on here. And I want to jump right into, I guess, what led you to write deep work? What were you observing? Was it part of a study or research that you were doing? And share that with the community, and we'll just make the conversation flow from there.
So to understand why I wrote deep work, you have to go back to that book that's on the shelf next to you right now. The book I wrote back in 2012 called So Good They Can't Ignore You. And this was a book about how do people end up loving what they do for a living. And one of the big findings was they get really good at things that are unambiguously valuable. And that this foundation is one on which you can build really passionate, satisfying, meaningful careers. So I put this book out here. Those who agreed with me said, this is great. Okay, interesting. But how do we do that? How do we become so good that we can't get ignored? How do we become really good at unambiguously valuable things so we can build these really interesting and meaningful and satisfying lives? And it was really trying to solidify my answer to that question that my attention was drawn to this topic, which was focused attention seems to play an increasingly important role, especially in the knowledge economy, in how people do really well. It's almost like a elixir or a superpower, that the better you are at focusing intensely without distraction, what I call deep work, the easier it is, or the more efficiently you can really start to produce things that matter. So it was following up from that last book that I ended up stumbling into a whole new book that became a topic all to itself.
Okay, so we have a lot of listeners on this program who do a lot of things. We have a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of very successful CEOs and folks who've been guests on this program, and a lot of just regular people who listen who have so many things around them distracting them every single day. As I say this right now, I'm looking obviously at our podcast recording tool. Messages are flying across my screen, texts, emails, social media posts, etc. It's never ending, and there's tons of distractions. So how can one step into deep work?
Well, okay, let me first make the brief argument for why you should care.
Okay.
Because people might not want to know.
I know why we need to care. I mean, like it is how you can't do, I don't believe in multitasking. I actually think you're doing one task at 1 second and then going to another. And there is something to be said that with all these distractions, it's noise around doing a really great job in what you need to do. So that's my opinion. I want to hear yours.
Well, that's definitely true. And I think people recognize increasingly, okay, you can't literally multitask. This was a big thing back in the early 2000s where people would have 3 or 4 windows open at the same time. A lot of research came out that said, okay, that's bogus, which people had a lot of anecdotal experience to probably back that up. You're trying to talk on the phone while typing your email. Both the conversation and the email probably go in weird, unintentional directions. Right. So what people do now, especially knowledge work, is they think they're single tasking. So they just have one thing open. They just have Microsoft Word open. They're writing out the whatever it is, the marketing plan, and they're concentrating deeply on it. Except every 10 minutes or so, they do a quick check. Let me just quick check my inbox. Okay, I'll close it again. Let me quick check my phone. Let me just quick check the text message that shows up in iMessage on my screen. It feels like you're single tasking because you're not doing multiple things at the same time. And these checks are real quick, but we now know from the psychology research that these can be just as bad, that there is a cost in what's called attention residue in just the context switch. It doesn't matter how long you look at your inbox or how long you look at your phone while you're doing a quick check. It's actually just the cost of that context switch, even if it lasts for just 30 seconds. When you try to bring your attention back to the original hard task, your cognitive capacity is reduced. And it's reduced for a long period of time. It could be 10, 15, 20 minutes, which means most people are doing another quick check before that attention residue has cleared. And so we have a whole population of knowledge workers who are accidentally putting themselves into a state of self-imposed reduced cognitive capacity. It's like anti-coffee or something like this. What can I do to reduce my ability to actually produce value with my brain? And so this is why when I define deep work, it's not just that it's mentally hard. I include in my definition this idea that it's done with no distraction. And what that means is no quick checks. So this activity that produces massive amounts of value, that lets you learn fast things really quick, which lets you produce really high quality work and do it at a rate that makes your colleagues think that you have some sort of superpower. This skill, deep work, depends on both of these things. You're concentrating intensely, and that while you're concentrating, there are zero context switch, zero distractions.
So those zero distractions, I want to talk about that. I was not kidding you. While we were doing this interview here, I try to keep there's no noise around me because we're doing an audio cast. So I shut those audio things off. But digitally, I'm getting these offers, so to speak, for me to be distracted, right? Text messages, alerts, social media posts, inboxes in the emails. There was an Amber Alert located over here not too long ago that just came through my phone. We're being pushed with a lot of these distractions. Okay, so what can we do with these push distractions? I get it. I can make a choice to shut everything out, but a lot of things are just coming right at us.
Well, first you have to realize that this idea that digital busyness is a mark of pride, this idea that if you're jumping from inbox to alert to social media post and back to the inbox, maybe you feel like you're a mover and shaker and you're being very productive and a lot is getting done. You're being sold a bill of goods, right? When you're hearing that message. This type of what I call shallow work, stuff that does not require intense concentration of you to apply hard-won skills, doesn't move the needle. It's not going to get you the new clients. It's not going to get you the promotion. It's logistical at best. And so the first thing I try to convince people before I give them the logistics of even how to do it is that it's worth doing. It's the deep work that moves the needle. Like the way I like to say for entrepreneurs, maybe the shallow work is what prevents you from losing one of your current clients. I mean, you need to answer to them real quick, but it's the deep work that's going to get you towards the 10x growth or the major acquisition, the big change. Or if you work for someone else, the shallow work might keep you from getting yelled at by your boss or keep you from getting fired, but the deep work is what's going to get you promoted, what's going to give you your boss's job in 2 or 3 years. That in our knowledge economy, especially as it gets increasingly competitive, it's the hard focus stuff that matters, and it's different than the other stuff, and we have to differentiate those two and realize that if you're not doing the hard focus stuff, that's probably a really big problem.
Yeah, using a vocabulary word that we'll both get on the same page, I guess, for our listeners, those that do the deep work thrive loud. And those are the ones that are just, not only getting the promotion, but they're exceeding it and getting to that other level. And I'm totally with you on this, because to the point of your book, So Good They Can't Ignore You, to be great is really drilling down and doing that really excellent work. I wanted to ask you, well, let's go through you personally here. What are some of the things that you do? You are a professor, you're a writer, you've got lots of things going on in your life, communications, you're being asked to come on interviews and podcast shows. This is a lot of stuff that happens to you every day. Tasks that you do to balance this out that enable you to do deep work when you need to.
Right. So as I like to say, I'm a millennial computer science book writer, and yet I've never had a social media account.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Never had one. I'm not interested in arguments about here's something you might miss or here's some small value. What I care about is what do I already know for sure is incredibly valuable in my life, and how can I put more energy towards that? And so I've never had a social media account. I don't web surf. You can't put a computer in front of me and say, entertain yourself. I don't have a cycle of websites to go through. I'm incredibly rigid about my time when I'm working. I use a technique called time blocking that I talk about in the book, in which instead of just driving my day off of, say, a task list and reaction, I give my time a job. What am I doing from 9 to 10? What am I doing from 10:30 to 11:30? I plan my weeks. I plan at the semester scale. I'm very zealous about where am I putting my time and attention? Where can I get the biggest impact? I use email, but I'm very bad at it sometimes. People have learned that about me because sometimes I'm on it. Sometimes it could be days when I'm not. I get yelled at a lot. I recognize that's a privilege of being a professor and not another job, that I can get away with that. But just to explain how I do what I do. And in general, I'm relentlessly focused on 2 activities, my books and my research and teaching as a computer scientist. And that's where I want to put most of my energy. Beyond that, I have a little bit of time to very efficiently handle logistical tasks. And then I keep a small quota, for example, of interviews and other things to make sure that I can keep doing those. But I have pretty strict rules on how many I might fit into a particular week or month. So in other words, I think a lot about what I should be thinking about because I really value my attention and where I put it as one of the most important things I control, at least with respect to my career.
What I find really interesting, and by the way, thank you for sharing that. And you definitely are the exception more than a rule, specifically the fact that you're a computer science professor. Just from, if I were to go around, I would say that the percent of people that have social media accounts is incredibly high today. And now, whether or not they're as active on it or not is one thing or another. But in today's medium, I mean, would I ask you this question? There are people in the job world where LinkedIn is actually almost a requirement these days, right? Having an online presence, if you would, to see where things are. That's a challenge. So to be able to not have that level of interaction and to not have that touch point is pretty unique. Although I will tell you, I actually have in my calendar, and I'm also a fan of time blocking, I have a window in the morning and a window in the afternoon that actually is focused on social media, because social media is a tool that is used in my business to promote a lot of the things we do, for all the promotions we do for the podcast, for some presentations and things. So there are points, but there are specific windows that I'm in it. I see people throughout the day who, like you said, they jump in, oh, let me go do this, let me go do that. And they don't ever get off their phones and never really focused. So I guess from your perspective, not having that addiction, because in some cases it is that, or not having those accounts, has there been a tremendous amount of curiosity on your part to want to see what this stuff is, or you know that it's too much of a distraction from and keeps you out of getting into the deep work that you want to do?
I don't find it that mysterious. I mean, people often are worried. They say, well, if you haven't had an account, how do you know you're not missing X, Y, or Z? But I think it's not neuroscience. It's pretty easy to see what goes on in a Facebook feed or a Twitter feed. The technology is not opaque to me.
Mm-hmm.
I see what's going on there because everyone in the world uses it, it seems, except for me these days. So I'm not too worried about that. And more importantly, this idea that instead of worrying about value that you're missing, instead trying to focus on the stuff that you already know for sure produces a lot of value. This is the craftsman ethos that has been successful for creating satisfaction and impact for millennia. Once you know for sure, this is something I can do well, and I like it, and it's important, put as much energy as you can into that. If you're diffusing all of this energy trying to build your online presence and make sure that you're up to all the latest news and jumping around the websites and all these other types of things, none of that will ever add up to the same value that's produced by becoming excellent at something that people care about. It's just such a quantum leap difference in the impact positively on your life in having a craft that you do well versus being connected and informed. And I think we've been overhyped. I think the value of connection and being informed has been overhyped. That we can be perfectly well connected and perfectly well informed without having, like the average American user does, check social media for average 2 hours out of our day. We don't, we're way too much going on the overboard side, I think, of this idea that more information and more connection is always better.
It's interesting. And I agree with this way of thinking about it. It's like anything else, everything in moderation, and taking small doses. And I wanted to ask this question. You are a professor at a university where every single one of your students has certainly one social media account, probably Snapchat's accounts, because they're not even millennials, they're younger than that now. How does your message and this theory of how you think connect with your students and what they believe and what they've grown up with basically throughout their entire life?
I've noticed in the last, let's say, 2 or 3 years that this younger generation, they're sometimes called iGen, the first generation to essentially have access to smartphones starting in their early teenage years. This generation is surprisingly receptive to this message. One of the ways I discovered this is I did a TEDx talk, for example, a couple years back, and it was titled "Quit Social Media," and they released it on YouTube. Now, from what I understand, younger audiences watch a lot of YouTube, right? And that video, it's been watched like 5 million times or something like this. And I think that's primarily young people who are watching it. And I hear from a lot of young people that they do not like what they are growing up into, which is a world of constant connection. And the amount of connectivity of this iGen makes us older people's connectivity look like we're Luddites, back destroying the mills in the 19th century. I mean, the connectivity that these young people are exposed to is just constant. And it's having real impacts on their psychological health. It's having real impacts on their happiness. It's having real impacts on their ability to thrive and succeed in the professional workspace. And so I'm sensing a backlash brewing, and it's actually coming from the most connected of the generational segments.
There's a fellow speaker, I'll leave his name out just because I don't know, he hasn't released this information yet, because I saw this was a work in progress of a presentation he gave, and he's going to give more of, so you'll hear more about it. This is fascinating what you're saying, because what he actually has done is he does this vacation from his cell phone. And I used to work on Wall Street, and Wall Street used to have this rule. It basically was you were on your 2-weeker and you had to be unplugged from everything that was related to your work. You couldn't access an account, you couldn't check an email, you couldn't check your phone, you couldn't do anything. And this actually had to do with security violations that took place in the late 90s and actually the fall of ING, which is of Barings Bank, which then took over ING. Nothing to do with that. But he loved that idea that literally people who worked on Wall Street were taking 2-week vacations and they were completely unplugged. So he did it for himself and put away his smartphones and did nothing. And he actually saw the doctor before this trip, before his time away, and then he visited the doctor afterwards. Cal, his health was physically better, his mindset was better, and they even measured his brainwave activity, and he actually was more laser focused in this focus exercise that he had. So I'm totally on board with this. I'm going to connect you with this individual when he's ready to communicate this. He'll probably use you as a resource. This was fascinating. The unplugging got him connected to himself, his health, to the people around him, and maybe even probably gave him more time to focus on things that were distracting him. But is that realistic? I don't know. It's really difficult to be able to unplug it, but it seems that you've proven that you can do it. So what messages and tasks are you giving to help people get into deep work, or certain recommendations that come out? We're going to give all the plugs for the book, but I'd love to give some real high level things that you're telling people to do that gives them a task list to get them more focused.
Right. So we have two categories here. We have your work life and your personal life. So deep work is really focused on your professional life. So I can give you a couple things for the task list to do to help increase the quantity and quality of the deep work in your professional life. I should say, as a side plug, I have a new book coming out in February called Digital Minimalism, Choosing a Focused Life in a Noisy World. And it's all about a philosophy for living with technology in your personal life that makes you a lot more like your friend on Wall Street, having a much more intentional relationship with your technology. I'm telling you, these minimalists I've worked with are so much more happy and even-keeled and satisfied than the average hyper-connected person. But that's a separate topic. So let's talk deep work in the office. There's two things to keep in mind. One, the people who succeed with integrating high concentration focus into their professional life, schedule it. If you're just hoping to come across a time in your day where you don't have much to do and you just kind of feel that you're in the mood for focusing, that's never going to happen. So they schedule it and they treat it like any other meeting or appointment. So if someone else tries to take that time, they treat it just like a meeting or appointment. Oh, I'm booked, but I'll be free again at 3 or whatever it is. So they schedule it. They also tend to have some sort of scheduling philosophy. So, I always do it at these times. Or at the beginning of the week, I schedule my deep work. Or it's every other week I take off Friday. Whatever it is, they tend to have some sort of set philosophy. So they don't even have to think about how much deep work to do or when they're going to do it. They have a system in place. The other thing that's important is you have to understand that the ability to concentrate is a trainable skill. Mm-hmm. So just because you put aside time to focus and you've shut off all of your devices and the internet doesn't mean that you're going to have a very successful session. But don't take that as evidence that you're just not meant to be a deep worker like many people do. It just means you're out of practice. And so people who succeed with deep work, think about it like playing the guitar or learning how to play basketball or something they have to practice, and they're going to get better at it. And they really are serious with training their concentration ability. And I have to tell you, the difference between having trained your concentration ability and not is really big. And so the upside of being a really good concentrator is really, really high, higher than most people realize.
I love it. It's right on there. I was going to ask this one question. What's your thoughts about those that engage in meditation to try to get themselves more focused?
Meditation can be helpful. There's a lot of different exercises that people have used successfully to gain better control over their mind. In the work context, I suggest in the book, for example, something I call productive meditation, which is a twist on mindfulness meditation where you go for a walk and instead of trying to just be aware of all of your thoughts, you focus on a single professional task and you try to make progress just in your brain. And taking a cue from mindfulness meditation, when you notice your attention wandering away from the problem you're working on in your mind to something else, you just notice that and bring it back to the problem. And then if it wanders some more, you notice that and you bring it back to your problem. I'm telling you, this is like pull-ups for your brain. It's really, really hard at first, but you get huge improvements pretty quickly. It's one of many things that people do to really push their focus ability.
Cal, I love asking all the guests on Thrive Loud this question. You've got a lot of great things going on, great books, and obviously your professorship here at Georgetown. When you have trouble thriving, who or what practice do you personally turn to get yourself back on the thriving track?
I tend to keep plans at the quarterly or semester scale that really lays out in the main areas of my professional life. What am I working on? How am I working on it? What are the milestones? What's the timing? What's my strategy for the next few months? When I'm feeling that I'm not getting a lot done or that I'm not firing up to my full capacity, it usually means I need to take a whole morning and I really need to think about and retool or maybe update this plan, or maybe I came out of a busy period and I haven't had a chance to make the new plan for the new semester. But stepping back and seeing the big picture and figuring out what am I doing in the months ahead, weeks ahead, that always helps me snap back into a rhythm of execution that I feel much better about.
Love it. Cal, this is the chance. Where can everybody find you? Although we know you're not going to send them a social media account or whatnot, or where you have it. But what's the best way for people to learn about Cal Newport so those that do have access to this can actually get to it? I was trying to figure out how to make that play in this plug section, but where could everyone find the book, you, and any other information you'd like to share?
You can find the books in most bookstores or Amazon. You can find out more about me at calnewport.com. I don't like social media, but I do like blogs, and I've been blogging for over a decade. So if you're interested in these type of ideas or many of the other types of ideas I've written about, there's a lot of content at calnewport.com. You can go down that rabbit hole pretty deep. Excellent.
Hopefully we're going to get Cal converted over to podcast too, which is just the audio blog version. One day, maybe we'll get him there. Cal, I love asking this question. What is your all-time favorite movie?
When I was growing up, my best friend and I were obsessed with the Indiana Jones series, and I don't think I'm allowed to answer anything else.
He's going to come after you and find you, I guess.
He would come after me. We would watch those 4 or 5 times a year, the whole series. I have that still memorized.
So of the 3, is there? Rank them, from Raiders to Temple of Doom to what's the last one? The one with Sean Connery.
With the Holy Grail and Sean Connery. Yeah. You got to go number I'm not a purist because I'll go number 3, number 1, then number 2.
Yes. He made a wise choice, right? Cal Newport, this has been a personal pleasure. I'm a fan of your work. I will tell you, it's good to hear a lot of the things that you do are applicable, coachable, trainable. And I think I'm with you. If more of us kept this level of focus, we can push those distractions away. And I hope our listeners got a chance to think about a really good lesson out of our program. So thank you for coming on so much.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed it.
And to all our Thrive Loud listeners out there, keep thriving onward and upward. And remember, be brief, be bright, be gone.
I didn't know you could fly a plane. Why, yes. Land, go.
You've been listening to Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond, you lucky person you. As long as you're not a weirdo, make sure to subscribe on iTunes, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please, I'm begging you, we're really cool. Also, follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Come on, I know you all have those social media platforms and you use them on the daily. If not, find us on the web at thriveloud.com. It was nice thriving with you, and see you next time.